So, are you one of those people that likes your pet at the table? Table scraps, pet member of the family? You just have to ask. This has come up. We are having a Pet Remembrance Sunday in a couple of weeks. So I was thinking about animals and God's care for animals and what are texts about animals. And I just this morning thought, well, here's an example of a family with a pet in the Bible. I had never thought about that before. You don't have to, safe space here. Are you or do you know someone who treats their pet like a family member? Yeah, we'll be anonymous here. So that is really kind of an incredible little story within the story today. 2 Samuel 11 is a huge departure from the rest of Samuel. In 1 Samuel, the hero David rises up from Bethlehem, being a shepherd boy, so he would understand sheep stories. He goes from being a shepherd boy to being quietly anointed king, but that doesn't become fulfilled until years later. He goes to a slayer of Goliath, the giant. He goes to be a soother of King Saul. David played the lyre. David is a superior warrior. And David, time and time again, across 1 Samuel and into 2 Samuel, where we are now, David is depicted as having the highest ethical and moral code imaginable. I mean, the prophet Samuel, of whom these books are named, he was the moral standard bearer, but he was the one God used to say, David is moral. David's integrity is beyond anybody else's integrity. David is always going to do the right thing. So we've talked about that these stories pass through and were set into the canon of the Bible through Deuteronomistic storytellers. And the Deuteronomistic storytellers really lift up David as just the model of excellence. So, for example, when King Saul tries to kill David, and David had ample opportunities to kill King Saul back, he doesn't do it. He lays aside his sword. David is depicted as having an incredibly loyal relationship with Saul's son Jonathan. And we saw last week that David took that relationship to the nth degree. After Jonathan died, David looked out for, do you remember Jonathan's son's name? Where's Helen Ryan when we need her? Mephibosheth. So David is depicted as so very kind, so very loyal, goes above and beyond, looks out for his enemy Saul, looks out for Jonathan after Jonathan's death. As David is ascending the throne, he makes sure to get the Ark of the Covenant out of storage and bring it into the capital city. He has a big party around the Ark of the Covenant, and then he wants to build a house for God's Ark. So David, toward enemies, toward family, toward God, David is the standard bearer of what is ethical. And then there's today. David is at home. He has not gone out to battle like he usually would. He's sitting around. It's afternoon. And then he gets up, wanders around, and he sees his neighbor lady, Bathsheba. And he wants her. And he gets her. He arranges for someone to scoop her up and bring him over to his place. And he commits adultery. And we modern people would say he commits rape. And then something else happens. Bathsheba becomes pregnant. So David doesn't want it known that he's the baby daddy. So what does he do? He summons Bathsheba's husband Uriah from the battlefront to come home and spend some time with his wife. Cover up. Uriah comes back home, and David's like, oh, thank you for being, you're such a wonderful soldier. Why don't you spend some time at home with your wife? Relax, take a load off for a little bit. So later, David finds out Uriah did not go home. There's another night. David plies Uriah with drink and food and makes it very easy for Uriah to want to go home and relax. Uriah won't do it. Uriah is too ethical. His moral code is too high. He's like, I'm not going to go home or enjoy the comforts of home when I have comrades in battle. Not going to do it. So then David escalates his crazy even further. By Uriah's own hand, David sends a message to the army commander, Joab. The message to Joab is, place Uriah in a very vulnerable position in battle where he's going to get knocked off. David orders a hit on his neighbor, his soldier, and Joab is complicit. So as you saw, Uriah is killed in battle. David scoops up Bathsheba, life goes on. That can be what we experience sometimes in life when horrible, horrible, horrible things happen. But this story gives us a little comfort. It says God saw what was going down, and God sent Nathan to confront, to talk to David. It's interesting, isn't it, that when Nathan does get sent to talk to King David, Nathan doesn't say, you adulterous, lying murderer. He does not say that. So he's not direct. Instead, Nathan is indirect in telling a little story. So that's the little story that we experienced, that there was a rich man, super rich, had so many flocks and cattle and food in abundance. And then there was, do you remember these guys? The poor man, the poor family who had a little lamb. Man, it just seems like that was just the most prized thing. They were full of love. Oh, treating that lamb like family, maybe beyond a pet. And the rich man steps across the line, seizes the prized family member of the poor family, and has it slaughtered for his own guest who happens to be in town. This little story elicits outrage from King David. So King David starts pointing the finger at that rich man. How dare he do that? That is he utterly without compassion. And then a very famous line in the Bible, Nathan says to the king, you are that man. And fortunately, David says, oh, I'm wrong. I'm a sinner here. So, yeah, I think Nathan kind of lucks out because I was thinking some people who bear the truth to others don't end up with as happy and successful a result. But in this case, Nathan speaks truth to power, and power says, oh, yep, I'm going to be accountable for what I've done wrong. So what an interesting story. One place to go with it is, what happened to David? You know, moral tarragon too. How many 10 commandments did he break on his way down there? 3 or 4 or more? So egregious. You wonder if it's like the phrase, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's a statement by Lord Acton. Could that be it? There are some clues that could be what's behind this. For one thing, David did ascend to the throne, and he got his house, and he's got his stuff, and he's living large, and maybe he's getting a little lazy. So yeah, that's going on. And then Nathan's story features a rich man who has lots and lots and lots of things, and a poor family. So, this power, this wealth, is that going to David's head? And the third little clue is also at the end. We didn't read all the detail, but of God saying, oh my goodness, I've given you so much power. I've given you so much stuff. You are so ungrateful. Ah. So, power, things corrupt us. So that's part of the thing, perhaps, of the story, because it is such a departure for whatever else was going on with David's life, at least as our Deuteronomistic storytellers of the Bible present David. Another interesting thing is Nathan's approach to David. I know a lot of times in healthy conversation, we talk about direct communication. Like, if you've got a beef or you've got a concern, go directly to the person. Don't gossip or talk to somebody else, or, be direct. What's up with that? So that's a marker of healthy conversation. Well, this story would say, yes, being direct, that's a good thing. I want to encourage that as a pastor and working through problems. And indirect conversation can also bring about healing. So it is interesting how Nathan uses this little story that he made up about a rich man and a poor man. And there's something about that story that made it safe for David to say, ugh. And it kind of shows, David still does have moral agency. So it created this space for David's outrage, and it created space for David to hear the truth. It's you that's doing it. So I know we live in crazy times, and, we talk about it every week. We're sad about some of the things going on in our country. We just seem so dysfunctional, and, I think it's, we're all concerned. What do you do? This week I heard an interview with a historian. It was very interesting. So a particular historian of American history. And so she gets asked a lot of times like, oh my gosh, things are so crazy in our country. And she responds, it's been crazy before. So it's kind of assuring. And then one of the questions she got, she took like audience questions. One of the questions she got was, what do you do? We live in a time where people believe conspiracy theories that are so clearly wrong. What do we do about that? Or what's up with that? And she responded, it's happened before in American history. So it's kind of like, okay, maybe kind of take some of the crazy and, concern away, or calms us down for problem solving. But then, what do you do? And she said, well, I'm a historian. I'm not a psychologist. But she says, when we have a friend or a family member who's maybe in an abusive relationship or a dysfunctional situation, or maybe struggling with a substance abuse disorder, You can be direct, and, that's a good tool in the toolkit, everybody. Don't cover up. But, sometimes they're so caught up in it. If you're, you kind of assess how far down the path someone is. And you can't be direct because you'll just get cut off in the relationship. So she said, if you've had a friend or a loved one in that situation, you maybe don't talk about it directly. And I was struck by the phrase that I've seen you say with people who have dementia. There's the thing called therapeutic pretending. And so maybe, you kind of go along with your loved one, just creating space for what's going on, and you're really concerned about what's happening in their life. So there's that therapeutic pretending on the one hand, and then there's kind of a two-step. Try to model honesty, happiness, joy, an authentic life. And maybe that creates a cognitive dissonance that helps loved ones think about things in a new way, or at least there's a bridge, a relationship, a path forward toward the truth. So, a third thing I'd add in that scenario of, what do we do when someone's in the wrong? And, we think they're in the wrong. We don't want to, what do you do? Prayer, let's keep in prayer. And, our own humility, we're always trying to sort out, is it me or is it what's going on? Just, create some things there. Prayer. And then, honestly, if you're ever in a situation like that, please seek out support. Because it can be a very long haul to get through dysfunctional things, whether it's us or a loved one or a friend. Get help. And of course, be part of church where we talk about such things. So this also got me thinking about a story from years ago. It did not happen here. It was with a group of youth I was working with. And I was 95% sure they vandalized something. 95% sure they did it. And so I said directly, guys, did you do that? Oh, no, we didn't do that. I don't know what you're talking, change the top, whatever. There was this no whatever. What do you do? And then I don't know, I got a creative, maybe Nathan-like thought, and I said, guys, if I saw that thing sitting there like it was, and I had shaving cream, and I had eggs, and I had a movie camera, heck yeah, I would have a little fun. Because that thing was just sitting there, ready for attack, and it'd be so fun to film it at the same time, because I know you brought your camera on this retreat. And immediately, one of them said, yeah, we did it. I'm like, why? What, so now I'm thinking about, what created, I think I was human. I showed I was fallible, and I wasn't trying to trick them or set a trap, but I was just totally human, totally fallible, and created safe space for them to say, be accountable. David was fallible. Isn't that good news? David was fallible. Fallible is a big word meaning flawed. David, he was fallible and, right at the same time, he was forgivable. Forgivable. Both at the same time. Fallible, forgivable. I think these are theological truths we need to talk about a lot more so that we can hold one another accountable in a safe way. And what are we accountable to? We're accountable to a covenant. It was very clear David violated the covenant. And we're accountable, in relationships that you're going to be loyal or show up and, Some people, they can manipulate and say, well, it's about me. Look up Darvo, D-A-R-V-O. Some people who are serially in self-denial, they deny, they accuse somebody else. Well, that person's really the problem, and then they reverse the victim offender. Well, you're the one that's punishing me. So, it can get so complicated. So we have to keep our eyes on the prize of who's really harmed here and who has compassion. And that seems to be sort of a bottom line part of the story. David's like, I can't believe this lout who take that sheep. They completely lack empathy for other people. So that's a marker for us to sort things out. And a third thing I lift up, so we're fallible, we're forgivable, and we are given tools like Nathan. There's a way forward, creatively, restorative justice. There are things that God gives us to create safe space for honesty. Some people, maybe they were beat up as a kid or just think, if I admit it, it's going to be worse, and they're protecting themselves. As the church, we are people of safe space. We know we're fallible, and we know we're forgivable. That's what the cross is about. Jesus died at the hands of fallible human beings, and Jesus said you're forgivable too. And Jesus sends the Holy Spirit for people to create space for this whole process of sorting things out. What is just? What is kind? What is possible? We're given the agency to be healers. To God be the glory. Amen.